What's good? It's Woog. Jaime Munguia just defeated John Ryder via ninth round TKO. This one did not go the distance. And if this was an audition to get the next fight against Canelo, Jaime Munguia just performed wonderfully in putting himself in position. Now, we'll get to what might be next for Canelo, and we'll also get to who some of the other exciting fights for Jaime Munguia, if he doesn't get Canelo, could be. Like, I still want to see him fight Edgar Berlanga or Christian Mabili, even though Mabili's with Top Rank. I don't see that one happening. But 168 is a pretty stacked division right now, and there are a lot of moving parts. I mean, Demetrius Andrade just lost to David Benavidez. Caleb Plant is still around. You've got some extremely talented-looking young guns like David Morrell, even Diego Pacheco. As young as those two are, I think that they're ready for some of the top talent. So we're also going to talk about what might be next for John Ryder. I mean, at this stage of his career, does he want to continue? And if he's going to continue, you'd imagine that it's going to be against the upper echelon fighters. I don't see him just falling back in the pack and just fighting for the sake of fighting. And this wasn't like a competitive decision loss for Ryder. I mean, he got dropped 4 times in total in this fight. So let's talk about the fight a bit. The first round was competitive, but I thought Munguia won the round. Munguia dropped Ryder in the second round. He dropped Ryder again in the fourth round. The third round was a close round. I thought that Munguia still did enough to win it. Chris Mannix, I know, had Munguia winning it. I think Boxing Scene, on the other hand, gave that one to John Ryder. So at that point, I had Munguia at the end of the fourth. I had Munguia winning all 4 rounds, and 2 of those rounds involved knockdowns. So even by this point, if Ryder starts to rally back, he's got a lot of catching up to do on the scorecards because he now has suffered 2 10-8 rounds. In the 5th round, I thought Munguia won that one. 6th and 7th round, I gave both of those to John Ryder. I think Boxing Scene gave both of those to Ryder. I think Mannix gave both of those to Ryder. So those were the most clear Ryder rounds. And then the 8th round, I thought Jaime Munguia won that one. And then Munguia dropped Ryder twice in the 9th round, and the fight was stopped at the end of the round as Ryder was against the ropes, and Munguia continued to throw punches like after the bell. I don't know if he didn't hear the bell. I mean, the crowd was loud by that point. Tony Sims, you know, John Ryder's trainer, was up on the ring apron trying to stop the fight, and so the fight was stopped at the end of the 9th. And you saw like Bernard Hopkins and Oscar De La Hoya outside of the ring as Munguia was dropping Ryder twice in that 9th round. They were just celebrating. You could see how excited Golden Boy as a promotion was that this was happening, because again, if you are trying to angle for a Canelo fight, you wanted something like a resounding stoppage win, especially since Canelo, as dominant or just as clearly as he beat John Ryder, he didn't stop John Ryder. Jaime Munguia did. So there is that. But let's talk about like some of the technical things that we saw in this fight. Munguia, you know, I did like there were some improvements that I saw with this fight being the first under the tutelage of Freddie Roach. Now, you saw that Eric Morales, who was Jaime Munguia's trainer for the several fights prior to this, Morales was still in attendance, and so he was still pulling for his boy Munguia. And it's not like they had a messy breakup, a messy departure. No, it seems like Eric Morales is running for mayor of Tijuana, so he didn't have like the time to dedicate himself full time to training Jaime Munguia. So Freddie Roach, Wildcard Gym, that is Munguia's, you know, new home. And I hope that he stays with Freddie Roach for at least the foreseeable future. I did like that he had his hands up more often. I like that he was using his jab as a range control mechanism. He wasn't just looking to load up with bombs, because he's always a voluminous puncher. He throws a lot of punches, throws a lot of hard punches, but you saw that he was boxing a bit more and he was putting his hands up a bit more. He was trying to roll with punches, step out of the way to make John Ryder fall short of some of his punches. But even with this slightly improved defense, slightly improved, but it was a noticeable. I did think that I observed some improvement defensively and technically. I thought that there was improvement, but you still saw that Munguia was walking into shots. And even when he's coming forward and throwing punches, he is still susceptible to counters. And I'm sorry, Canelo Alvarez is just the type of fighter who could make you pay for that in a way that John Ryder can't. So I'm not saying that I would expect Canelo versus Jaime Munguia if that fight is to go down. I'm not saying that I expect it to look like Canelo versus James Kirkland. I think that it might look a little more like Canelo versus Alfredo Angulo, even though, look, Angulo was the old fighter when Canelo fought Angulo. And Angulo started to kind of rally back late in the fight, but he ended up getting stopped in that one. In this fight, Canelo would be the older fighter with less volume. But again, I just see Munguia getting hit by these counter right hooks. Because remember, Ryder's a southpaw, so Ryder was just popping Munguia with these check right hooks. If Munguia is getting caught cleanly with those punches, I'm just imagining what kind of counters Canelo's going to be able to hit Munguia with, especially with as high a boxing IQ as Canelo has. He's able to sniff out some of these opportunities as a fighter like Munguia opens up. Now, granted, because of the volume, because of the heat that Munguia puts on you, I can see him kind of wearing Canelo into the ropes and Canelo, having to sweat a bit and getting overworked in moments where he's just waiting for the tide to die down a little bit before he starts coming forward and applying some pressure and mental pressure on Munguia again. But Munguia simply cannot let his hands go against Canelo in the way that he did against John Ryder. I mean, the consequences are too drastic to just throw caution to the wind in some of those moments. But again, John Ryder did have his moments in this one. He won multiple rounds, but again, I mean, it was almost immaterial because of how much he was falling behind seemingly on the scorecards. So he hit Munguia with his share of right hooks and his share of left hands, which that part was, to be very expected because Munguia hasn't fought a southpaw since Gonzalo Correa. And that was kind of a stay busy fight, not a super high level fighter. But aside from Correa, it had been several years. I mean, basically, since we saw Jaime Munguia splash onto the scene, we hadn't seen him fight a lot of southpaws. So we knew that there was going to be a different element to that. But I was also wondering what Jaime Munguia's punching power and punch absorption would be like versus a true 168 guy. Because look, when Munguia fought Derevianchenko was a middleweight coming up to fight Munguia. And then the couple fights before that, they were, I believe, like catchweights where it wasn't quite 160, but it wasn't quite 168, like against Jimmy Kelly. So this was Munguia's first test against a near elite 168 guy. And I mean, he passed this one with flying colors. To me, it answered the question. Yes, his punch does carry to 168. And yes, he is still a punching force at 168. Now, the first knockdown, he drilled John Ryder with that right hand. Second knockdown, John Ryder stepped into a jab. So it was mid-exchange, and John Ryder walked into a left jab from Munguia, and it sat him on his butt. I'm sorry, if you walk into a jab, you could get put down. I mean, I think Roy Jones dropped Felix Trinidad, a smaller Felix Trinidad who was fighting way above his natural weight classes against Roy Jones. But Felix Trinidad stepped into a Roy Jones jab and got sat on his butt. So that was the second knockdown of John Ryder at the hands of Munguia, and that was in the fourth round. And then in the ninth round, Munguia absolutely drilled John Ryder with kind of a looping, or, because Munguia will throw a straight right hand, but he'll also throw like an overhand looping right hand. But now he's got this kind of wide right hand where it's kind of like it comes around and it's like a bomb of a right hand. It's not as straight as some of his others. So he throws this kind of crushing, looping right hand, and it's splashed against the side of Ryder. Ryder takes a step back, and then Munguia sets up another punch, but it looked like Ryder was already on his way down. It was just kind of a delayed reaction in that first ninth round knockdown. And then that was the beginning of the end. After that, Ryder was clearly hurt and he was on his way to getting finished. So yeah, spectacular victory for Jaime Munguia. Again, he got caught with a lot of punches, but I do think that he's developing some defense and some strategy where you can win rounds without hurting the guy super badly, to where you could box your way to winning a round and you don't always have to empty out the arsenal. I mean, look at Jaime Munguia against Gabriel Rosado, who Gabriel Rosado was a part of the broadcast. He wasn't a part of the play-by-play type commentary. That was still Sergio Mora, who was giving you that boxer's analysis, but up in the booth, right? Gabriel Rosado was there, and it was pretty, I like Gabriel Rosado's commentary. But if you look at Munguia versus Rosado, Munguia was just like let's just empty the clip at every opportunity we get and just hit him with as many hard punches as possible. You saw that there was a more measured approach against John Ryder here. So if Munguia does get the Canelo fight, which you would think that he might be best position to do so, because it just sounds like Canelo's not going to be fighting David Benavidez next, which is unfortunate. And I also, you have to consider, people talk about like Canelo's fight by fight schedule like it's a foregone conclusion that if he fights in May, that he will be ready to fight in September. I'm like, yo, this is boxing. Anything could happen in that first May fight. Canelo could suffer a cut, an injury, something or he could lose, right? Where he will want the rematch in September. A lot of things can throw the schedule off. So proceed with your fight planning with caution. I mean, we were just told a couple months ago we were about to get Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder. Once Joshua handled business against Otto Wallin and Wilder handles business against Joseph Parker, not so fast. I mean, what's Canelo, like 34 now? Well, he's still 33, but he turns 34 in July. But it's like he's 33, and in boxing age, he's much older, you would have to think, because he's had so many fights throughout his career, started super young, right? A mid-teenager, basically. And he's had 64 professional fights. So yes, on paper, he's 33, but in boxing years, again, he's a bit older. And Jaime Munguia is a young, strong, hard-hitting, voluminous, punching, durable fighter who will put the heat on you. Like, he will make you work. This will not be a walk in the park for Canelo Alvarez. This will not be like Canelo Alvarez versus Avni Yildirim. Now, if he is still at this stage of Canelo's career able to make a Jaime Munguia look like he made Avni Yildirim look, then hey, hats off. Like, you know, I underestimated Canelo at this stage of his career and maybe overestimated what Jaime Munguia is bringing to the table. And who knows, maybe John Ryder was just so post-prime that it made Munguia's punching power look that much more devastating right now. I don't know, but Munguia, for what it's worth, did look fantastic in this fight against John Ryder. But I would just much rather Canelo Alvarez fight the true deserving next opponent, which would be David Benavidez. I mean, the guy in 2023 just beat Caleb Plant and had Caleb Plant holding on for dear life by the end of that fight. And then he stopped Demetrius Andrade by the middle rounds. Like, look, I want to see Jaime Munguia. I wouldn't be mad at a Jaime Munguia versus Demetrius Andrade fight against Edgar Berlanga, somebody like that. And with Golden Boy wanting a big fight for Munguia, I don't think Munguia is going to look anywhere near the direction of a David Morrell, even a Diego Pacheco. Not to say Munguia can't beat Pacheco, but I mean, damn, you know, I've got a very high opinion of Pacheco, even at this young stage of his career, coming out of South Central LA, for those that know. So again, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Canelo could schedule a fight with Munguia in May and then expect to be ready to go again in September. 33 years old. And again, I think that even if he beats Jaime Munguia, there will be some wear. There will be a price to pay. I mean, a fight like that, I just don't see coming at no cost. I mean, this guy just came off of a hand surgery not too long ago. So there are a lot of things that could go wrong that could disrupt that type of a forecasted schedule. But and you would also think that with this PBC deal that Canelo has, now Canelo more or less gets to call his own shots, right? But he's got this deal with PBC. And so let's say he wants to fight Jaime Munguia. I mean, first he would be going against that whole, I don't want to fight another Mexican. I mean, at least with David Benavidez, Benavidez is a Mexican-American, so you could still argue, okay, so he's not a Mexican who is fighting out of Mexico. He is of Mexican and other nationalities or ethnicities, but he's of Mexican descent, but he is an American. So technically, Canelo could, use some logical jujitsu to say, yeah, David Benavidez, you could fight him and still not go against your word. Okay, if you're going to fight Jaime Munguia, you are fighting your Mexican brethren, essentially. So there is that, if that still is a thing with Canelo, right? But also with the PBC deal, you would think that this being their inaugural year, PBC's inaugural year with Amazon Prime, that they want to give them as much eyeballs and as much action as possible, right? So they announced their March 30 card. Okay, it's going to be a pay-per-view. You would have to think that Canelo's May fight, of course, that's going to be a pay-per-view. Are they going to split the pie with Golden Boy and DAZN? So if this is a pay-per-view, would it just be an Amazon Prime pay-per-view with Canelo versus Jaime Munguia, a Golden Boy fighter, and only have that one on Amazon Prime? How do Eric Gomez and Oscar De La Hoya and team, how do they sell that to DAZN? Basically saying, I know that you guys worked with us to build up Jaime Munguia, over the years, but we're going to feed him to Canelo, basically. Is it going to be such a payday where DAZN says, okay, cool, as long as you break bread, you pay us something to make it worth it out of the big pie that you're going to be getting in that Canelo sweepstakes fight, where DAZN basically gives their blessing and says, okay, Golden Boy, go ahead and send, and we'll allow you to send Jaime Munguia, a DAZN fighter, over to PBC Amazon Prime for this fight against Canelo. So they'll have to work that out. But also, Canelo and De La Hoya have pretty much been like enemies since Canelo left Golden Boy, and they had the whole contractual dispute, and they've kind of aired each other out publicly. And you see De La Hoya throwing shade, as he, does with several different fighters and several different guys that he formerly did business with, and sometimes guys that he's currently doing business with. But you've seen the tension, ongoing tension between Canelo and Golden Boy. Have they smoothed that over where Canelo is down to work with Golden Boy again? So again, those things would have to be, hashed out. Is it going to be a co-platform pay-per-view, or will PBC essentially be leasing the services of Jaime Munguia? We'll see about all of that. But again, in a perfect world, we get Canelo Alvarez versus David Benavidez next. I just don't want, at this stage, I don't want, at least right now, Canelo versus Jermall Charlo. That was a fight that I was wanting for years. Since they were both 154 guys, I was wanting that. I was wanting that when they were both at 160. But I don't want it right now, especially after how we saw Jermall Charlo looking against Jose Benavidez Jr. He didn't look terrible. In fact, he looked a little better than I expected him to, but he's clearly not at this stage. He's not the same Jermall Charlo who had just beaten Derevianchenko pretty convincingly a couple years prior to that. So I want to see Jermall Charlo in another couple fights before he fights somebody the caliber of Canelo. Like I'd rather see Jermall fight Demetrius Andrade. Hell, maybe John Ryder could be the fighter that welcomes Jermall Charlo to 168, like proper 168, not catch weight 163, 164, but proper 168. Maybe at this stage with a still rusty Jermall Charlo against a having lost a couple tough fights and now having gotten stopped John Ryder. Maybe that is a good fight to make. Look, for John Ryder, I expect him to fight like somebody like an OG, like an older fighter. I expect him to want to fight maybe a Demetrius Andrade, maybe a Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant's coming off of a loss. Or again, Jermall Charlo. I don't expect John Ryder at this stage to want to fight David Benavidez. Probably not even Christian Mabili, but maybe Chris. I don't know. You probably want to stay away from some of the more active guys who are still seemingly on an upward trajectory. Like, I don't think John Ryder is going to want to fight David Morrell, Diego Pacheco, maybe Edgar Berlanga. But yeah, again, for Jaime Munguia, I would want to see Munguia fight Edgar Berlanga. I still think that there's a ton of intrigue with that, and there's less red tape and things that need to be worked out because Berlanga is with Matchroom, would be fighting on DAZN. Jaime Munguia, Golden Boy, DAZN. That one kind of makes itself. And because of the Mexican versus Puerto Rican thing, you could, especially in today's boxing climate, you could make that argument that, I don't like the argument, but you could make the argument that it could even be a pay-per-view fight. I don't agree with it, but they could probably sell it, especially after Munguia's destruction of John Ryder. But yeah, those are some of my thoughts right now. Props to Jaime Munguia for delivering big in this pretty high stakes moment. Like, there was some pressure to not only win the fight, but to look impressive and scintillating in doing it. And yes, he did it in a way where it adds intrigue to Canelo versus Jaime Munguia. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. How do you think Munguia looked? How do you think John Ryder looked? Like, was this the same John Ryder that we had seen, entering his last few fights? Or should he pretty much think about calling it a day? Like, is there still fights worth having for John Ryder at this point? Let me know your thoughts on all that. And also, do you think, based on what you've seen here and based on what you've seen in Canelo's last couple of fights, do you think Jaime Munguia has a decent shot at beating Canelo? Again, I think that he still gets hit too much. I think that Canelo is just so sharp of a puncher, counter-puncher, hits so damn hard. He's very economical, so maybe Munguia could win some rounds if Canelo's not putting Munguia down. Maybe Munguia could win some rounds and have Canelo pretty stressed in moments. And, but Canelo hasn't been finishing his fight strong. Maybe Canelo versus Munguia today is a lot more competitive than it would have been even just 2 years ago. Maybe we get a totally different fight or a very different fight today because of the improved skills and just where Munguia is career-wise, and this version of Canelo where it's not only the reduced punch output, because he was already becoming more economical. Basically, I would say ever since the Daniel Jacobs fight for Canelo, he's been lower volume, more economical, to where you make every one of those hard punches count. By the way, Munguia went to the body very well against Ryder. Canelo goes to the body well as well. But again, if Munguia is going to go to Canelo's body, you're opening yourself up for some devastating counters. But again, in this stage of Canelo's career, even after those first couple of fights where he became more economical, like, I thought he was economical against Sergey Kovalev. That's why Kovalev was able to win some of those rounds. Canelo was coming forward, but was having trouble closing the distance and was being very, very patient. Same thing with his fights against, he methodically just walked down Callum Smith, but he was, economical against Billy Joe Saunders, against Caleb Plant, and obviously the fights after that. Dimitri Bivol, obviously too economical. And, Bivol is so much more advanced than Jaime Munguia. So I can't see Munguia executing the Dimitri Bivol playbook against Canelo. He's got to find other means of beating Canelo. He could do some of the things that Dimitri Bivol did, put volume together, try to back Canelo up, maybe against the ropes, but defensively and just how you control range, Munguia still is there to get hit too much. And I think he would get hit with some Canelo bombs. But yeah, let me know if you think that Munguia is going to be next for Canelo. Even again, given those, we'll call them promotional peculiarities. You know what I'm saying? Do you think that that's next? And how do you think that that would play out? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.